This is Asia Now.
It's 2 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 11:30 in New Delhi and 1 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Glenda Chong. At this hour, Tokyo and other parts of Japan will likely face an extended state of emergency as officials try to control the relentless spread of the coronavirus ahead of the Olympic Games. Wary Victorian residents back on another lockdown as Australian authorities race to track the spread of a highly infectious coronavirus variant. Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai sentenced to another 14 months in jail for marching in an unauthorized assembly when anti-government protests took place in 2019. An advisory panel to the Japanese government has approved an extension of emergency coronavirus measures for Tokyo and 8 other prefectures. Japan is pulling out all the stops 2 months ahead of the start of the Tokyo Olympics, with growing calls they cancel the games. Now, the current states of emergency are set to end on Monday, but will likely be extended till the 20th of June. The games begin a month later, and that's the 23rd of July. The government's task force is expected to make a final decision after taking questions in Parliament this afternoon. Japan recorded more than 4,100 new cases and 111 deaths yesterday. It has been struggling to control the spread of highly infectious new virus variants. Starting today, people entering from India and several other countries will have to self-isolate at government-designated facilities for 10 days. The head of Japan's doctors' union has warned that authorities can't deny the possibility of a new strain of COVID-19 emerging if the Olympics are held.
コロナと戦いに勝利するためには、このような動きを止める必要があります。そのために私たちは東京オリンピックの中止を求めました。
US health experts have said plans to hold the Olympics were not informed by the best scientific evidence. They called for urgent action to assess the health risks of proceeding with the Games and additional measures to help mitigate them. But not all are against the event. The European Union has backed Japan holding the Olympics, saying it will be a symbol of global unity. Nearly 7 million people in Australia's state of Victoria are in a new lockdown, the 4th since the start of the pandemic. Now, it took effect overnight and will last for a week. Authorities hope this will help them contain a fast-growing COVID-19 cluster in Melbourne. 4 new cases were reported on the first day of the lockdown, bringing the cluster total to 30 in just 5 days. Victoria residents must now remain at home at all times, well, except for essential work, grocery shopping, healthcare or exercise. Masks must be worn at all times unless at home. Prime Minister Scott Morrison warns of tough times ahead.
The next 7 days in Victoria will be very challenging. And of course, we are very mindful of the distress and the difficulty that this will impose upon people right across Victoria as a result of what is being described, rightly I think, by the acting Premier as a circuit-breaking lockdown, and a lockdown for 7 days that hopefully won't go as long as that.
Mr. Morrison has said he will ensure Australia is among the leaders in the world when it comes to administering vaccine shots. But Australia has not only been slow in its rollout, vaccine hesitancy is rife. Brianna Piazza tells us what authorities are doing to convince more people to get inoculated.
We've heard many times now from our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, that Australia is the envy of the world because it's managed to, for the most part, stamp out COVID-19. In most of the country, really, life has been going on as normal with little or no restrictions at all. So it's really these lockdowns that are happening tend to be not too often, but still very, very much a concern for businesses, particularly here in Melbourne. So pretty much one of the issues that we're running into with the vaccine rollout is hesitancy. So that relates to very much sections of the population that are eligible to be vaccinated. Many people are holding off on getting their vaccinations because of concerns they may have around the safety of the vaccine. So even just in recent days, we heard that the vaccination hubs in Melbourne were pretty much empty, and people who walked past described these as heartbreaking scenes. But that is starting to pick up in recent days. State authorities in Victoria are starting to talk about opening up vaccinations to younger sections of the population. But also recently, we've just heard that businesses are getting on board as well. So Australian airline Qantas is considering offering free flights and frequent flyer points to people who have had both vaccinations. It's understood that they're still trying to iron out a few of the finer details, but if that goes ahead, that would be coming into effect sort of towards the next few months and for the rest of the year. So definitely what we understand is that Australia's borders will remain closed until we can get much of the population vaccinated.
Well, Singapore will bar all entry to short-term travellers who have been to Victoria in the 21 days prior, and this rule will kick in on Sunday. Singapore citizens, permanent residents and long-term pass holders who recently travelled to Victoria State must serve a 7-day stay-home notice in their residence. Swab tests will be done at the start and end of the isolation period. Now, at the moment, travellers are only required to test negative upon arrival in Singapore. Travellers from other parts of Australia are not affected by this latest rule, as Singapore will monitor and adjust border measures to manage the situation with COVID-19. Well, Australia is also battling another growing natural disaster. A plague of mice is threatening farmers in New South Wales. Millions of rodents have infested the agricultural plains across the state, forcing many farmers to burn thousands of dollars worth of hay and grain. And there are growing concerns over the potential economic and social crisis. By day, the crisis is less apparent, and that's because the nocturnal animals come out after dark in the millions, and they can be heard scratching ceilings and chewing electrical wires. But residents say the stench of mice urine and decaying flesh is a constant, both day and night. Now, the plague is a cruel blow to farmers in the state who have been battered by fires, floods and pandemic disruptions. New South Wales Top Agricultural Association predicts the plague will wipe out more than $775 million from the value of the winter crop. The state government has announced nearly $40 million in funding to tackle the plague, and it has ordered 5,000 litres of the banned poison from India. But critics fear the poison will kill not only mice, but also animals that feed on them. And there are fears the infestation will spread. Experts warn the mouse plague is showing no sign of slowing down, and it's spreading across the country. Now, India is scrapping local trials for what it calls well-established foreign coronavirus vaccines in a bid to accelerate its inoculation rollout. India today reported over 186,000 new coronavirus infections, its lowest since mid-April, while some 3,600 more people have died. Last month, India pledged to fast-track shots from Pfizer-BioNTech, Johnson & Johnson and Moderna. But talks stalled after the government insisted on local trials and a dispute over indemnity. An official says they are now expecting doses from Pfizer as soon as July, but adds that the government is still examining the request of pharmaceutical companies to grant them legal protection.
We are looking at what their expectations from the government are, and they are looking at what our expectations from them are. That's the process in which this will move, because they have to come into India, they have to apply for licensure, so that's one path. And there are imperatives of cold chain and supply, etc., so that's being looked at.
Only about 11% of India's 1.3 billion population have received at least one dose of the vaccine, and it has the lowest rate among countries with the highest number of infections. Vaccine supplies and raw materials to make vaccines will likely top the agenda when India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar meets his US counterpart